Hey, have you ever found yourself in a room with someone who just seems to take up all the space? You know the type. They have that air of confidence that feels like it's pressing down on you, and suddenly you feel small, nervous, maybe even a little intimidated. But what if I told you that intimidation is mostly an illusion, one that you can break free from with the right mindset and tools? Today, we're going to dive deep into the psychology behind why people feel intimidated and, more importantly, how you can stop feeling that way forever. Think about this. Why do certain people seem to have a natural ability to make others feel small? Is it their title, their experience? Or maybe it's that they're just louder or more assertive than the rest? Well, here's the truth. Intimidation is a two-player game. It's not just about what they're doing, but how you're perceiving it. They're playing a role, but so are you, and you have the power to rewrite your role in that dynamic. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. People aren't actually as confident as they appear. Studies show that many of the behaviors we interpret as confidence or dominance are actually rooted in insecurity. That person who talks the loudest in meetings or who always has to be right, they might be compensating for their own fears. When you realize that, it's like pulling back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz. They're just as human as you are. So, the first step is understanding that they are not the giant you think they are. Here's a little psychological trick for you. Flip the script in your mind. When someone's trying to dominate a conversation or space, instead of seeing them as bigger, imagine them shrinking down to your level. Visualize that they're the same size as you, or even smaller. It's a mental exercise, but it can change how you perceive their presence. It might sound silly, but our brains are incredibly visual, and this simple shift can make a huge difference. But what about when you're face-to-face with someone who just seems to radiate authority? Maybe a boss, a senior colleague, or even a client who's throwing their weight around. Here's where body language becomes your secret weapon. One of the most powerful things you can do is mirror their body language. It's called the chameleon effect. When you subtly mimic someone's posture or gestures, you create a sense of equality. They subconsciously start to see you as being on their level, and more importantly, you start to feel like you are too. And let's not forget about eye contact. It's like the handshake of conversation. When someone is trying to intimidate you, they'll often hold eye contact just a little too long, trying to assert dominance. But here's what you do. Hold their gaze for just a beat longer than you're comfortable with. Then look away slowly. Not quickly, not in a nervous glance, but as if you're choosing when to look away. It sends a message that you're in control of yourself. And that's a message that's hard to ignore. Now let's talk about self-talk. I know it sounds like one of those cliché self-help tips, but the way you talk to yourself during intimidating situations actually shapes how you experience them. If your inner dialogue is saying, "I hope I don't mess this up," or "they're way smarter than me," then you're already undermining yourself. Instead, use phrases like, "I belong here," or "I have just as much right to speak as anyone else." It might feel weird at first, but it's like reprogramming your brain, turning down the volume on that inner critic. Okay, so you're thinking that's great for the mind games, but what about the actual conversations where people just try to bulldoze over me? Here's where I introduce you to the power of the strategic pause. When someone is dominating a conversation, they're often expecting you to either fight back or shrink away. But there's a third option: pausing. After they say something, take a moment before you respond. Let the silence sit for just a second longer than usual. It does two things. It gives you a moment to gather your thoughts, and it subtly signals that you're not rushing to match their pace. You're in control of your own timing. And here's the thing about pausing. It's incredibly powerful because it shows that you're comfortable with the situation. It makes the other person question their own sense of control. You've taken back the pace of the conversation, and that's a subtle yet powerful way to shift the dynamic. But let's get real for a second. What if you're in a situation where the stakes feel incredibly high? Maybe it's a presentation, an interview, or a confrontation with someone who holds a lot of power over your career. In those moments, the anxiety can be overwhelming. That's when you use reframing. Instead of thinking, "This person has power over me," ask yourself, what is their need in this moment? What are they looking for? It shifts your focus from their authority to their motivations. Maybe they're stressed about their own performance, or they need reassurance. When you shift your mindset from being on the defensive to being a problem solver, You start to feel like you're partnering with them rather than competing against them. Remember this: no one can make you feel small unless you believe that you are. Intimidation works because we allow ourselves to internalize it. But once you start seeing those so-called intimidating people as just people, their power over you crumbles. They might be louder, more assertive, or more experienced, but they're still human, with their own insecurities and flaws. So, let's recap the game plan for breaking free from intimidation. First, remember that they're not as confident as they appear. Visualize them on the same level as you, and watch how your perception shifts. Use body language to your advantage. Mirror them and hold that eye contact. Change your self-talk to reinforce your own value. And when things get intense, don't be afraid to use the power of a strategic pause. And most importantly, remember that you're not in a battle, you're in a conversation. It's time to stop shrinking and start standing tall, because you deserve to take up space in every room you walk into. If this video helped you see intimidation in a new light, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that they're bigger than they think. Stay sharp, stay strong, and I'll catch you in the next video.